It was a bright, golden morning in the heart of San Francisco, the kind of morning that made people believe life could start over again. But for Mason Hale, life had already broken him in more ways than he could count. He stood outside a downtown hotel, holding his daughter Lily's small hand, their reflections caught in the glass doors of the Grand Imperial Plaza. His worn-out shoes and faded shirt looked painfully out of place against the marble floors and polished suits that passed by. He was just there to deliver breakfast orders for the cafe he worked at part-time, trying to make ends meet after his wife's passing 2 years ago. Every day was a quiet fight to give his little girl the normal life she deserved, even if he had to sacrifice his own dreams. As Mason pushed open the revolving door, a sudden commotion rippled through the lobby. Paparazzi flashes burst like lightning outside, and a tall woman in a navy blue silk dress rushed in, her heels clicking sharply on the floor. She was Grace Whitmore, billionaire heiress, tech visionary, and one of the most photographed women in America. But at that moment, she wasn't the picture of elegance everyone knew. Her eyes were wild with panic as she scanned the room. And then, before Mason could react, she grabbed his arm. "You," she whispered urgently, her voice trembling just enough to betray her calm. "Pretend you're my husband. Please. Just for tonight. If you believe in kindness, second chances, and the power of fate bringing broken souls together, please take a second to like, comment, share, and subscribe to Keenness Journal. Because stories like this remind us that love sometimes starts in the most unexpected moments." Mason blinked in confusion, his mouth parting in disbelief. He'd barely had time to answer before Grace linked her arm with his and turned toward the cameras. Outside the glass doors, a wave of reporters screamed questions.
"Grace,
"Who's the mystery man? Is that your husband? Are the rumors true?" She forced a graceful smile and held Mason's hand as if they'd known each other forever. Mason's pulse raced. He didn't understand what was happening, but the look in her eyes was desperate, pleading, human. And something about that vulnerability made him play along. He nodded faintly and slipped into the role she asked for. "Smile," she whispered under her breath as photographers flashed like fireworks. Mason gave an awkward half-smile, while Lily, still clutching his sleeve, stared up at the elegant stranger in awe. Grace knelt to meet Lily's gaze, softening instantly. "And who's this beautiful girl?" she asked sweetly, loud enough for the cameras to hear. "Our daughter," Mason said quietly, and for a fleeting second, something changed in Grace's expression, as if that simple word "our" struck her heart in a place she hadn't felt in a long time. They were ushered into the hotel ballroom, where an elite charity gala was already underway. Mason's heart pounded as chandeliers glittered above him, and waiters in tuxedos floated by with champagne trays. He could smell money in the air, that quiet arrogance of the rich who'd never known hunger or fear. Grace guided him to a corner table near the stage, pretending to introduce him to fellow billionaires. He didn't belong here. He was a single dad who'd barely been able to pay rent that week. But Grace treated him like he mattered, like she trusted him completely. And that was enough to make him stay. As the evening went on, Mason learned the truth in whispers between her smiles. Grace had built her empire alone after her father's death, but the board was ruthless. They questioned her leadership, doubted her ability to stay grounded. A corporate rival had begun spreading rumors that she was unstable, and tonight's gala was her only chance to prove them wrong. "The husband," she mentioned, a lie she'd told investors to appear stable and family-oriented. But when her fake date had backed out last minute, she had no one to save her. No one until Mason. He didn't know why he agreed. Maybe it was the gratitude in her voice. Maybe it was the way she bent down to help Lily fix her hair before the dinner started. Or maybe he just remembered what it felt like to have no one believe in you. So, he played the part, not perfectly, but honestly. When people asked how they met, he said, at a coffee shop, which was true in its own strange way. When someone joked about him marrying up, he smiled and said, "She married for the right reasons." Grace looked at him, and for a moment, it wasn't just an act. Halfway through the gala, the rival CEO, Nathan Cross, made his move. He stood at the microphone, his voice smooth and calculated. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said, glancing toward Grace, "I think we can all agree that image and stability matter in leadership. Some of us are real. Some of us pretend." The room chuckled softly, eyes turning to Grace. It was an ambush. Nathan knew about her lie. Grace's hands trembled under the table, but Mason reached over and held them tightly. Then, before she could say a word, he stood up. The room went silent as the single dad from nowhere, the man in an old suit, walked to the stage. He took the microphone and looked straight at Nathan. "You're right," he said, voice calm but firm. "Some of us do pretend, not because we want to deceive, but because sometimes life pushes us into impossible corners. But let me tell you something. Grace Whitmore doesn't pretend about her heart. I've seen the way she treats people. I've seen her kindness. Maybe she doesn't have a traditional family like you think, but she's built one with compassion, generosity, and courage, and I'm proud to stand beside her." The audience went completely still. Grace's eyes filled with tears she couldn't hide. For a moment, the billionaire and the single dad were equals. Two broken people holding each other up in a world that didn't care how much they'd suffered. When Mason returned to the table, she reached out and touched his face softly, whispering, "You didn't have to do that." He smiled faintly. "Yes, I did." After the gala, Grace asked them to stay for breakfast the next morning. She insisted. Mason wanted to refuse, but Lily's excitement won him over. So, they stayed in the grand suite, with floor-to-ceiling windows that framed the morning sun like a painting. Lily twirled in the living room, laughing, while Grace watched her with quiet wonder. "She's beautiful," Grace said softly. "She looks like her mother." Mason nodded, a shadow crossing his face.
"Yeah, she does."
Grace didn't press further. She just poured him coffee and asked about his life. For the first time in years, someone truly listened. By afternoon, a news headline exploded online: Grace Whitmore's secret family. The billionaire's heartwarming reveal. But instead of mocking her, the public loved it. They called her relatable, authentic, even brave. The charity's donations tripled overnight. Investors who once doubted her now praised her. Family first. Image. But what surprised Grace most was that she didn't care about the image anymore. What mattered was the warmth she felt when Mason and Lily laughed together on her couch. Over the next few days, Grace and Mason stayed in touch. She invited him to consult for her company's new outreach program, a project for single parents rebuilding their lives. Mason was hesitant, but she convinced him that his story could help others, and it did. Soon his small cafe gained attention. Orders poured in and he was able to hire help, buy new clothes for Lily, even dream again. Grace often visited the cafe, sitting quietly at the corner table, watching him work with a soft smile. Then, one morning, she came by early, before the crowd, wearing a simple white blouse and jeans. Mason looked up surprised. "You look different," he said. She smiled. "I feel different." She took a deep breath and said, "Mason, about that night at the gala. I know it started as pretend, but I haven't been able to stop thinking about it. About you. About Lily. I thought I had everything, but maybe I was just missing the right people." Mason froze, emotion tightening his throat. "Grace, are you saying?" She nodded gently. "I'm saying that maybe we could stop pretending." For the first time in a long time, Mason laughed. A deep, genuine laugh that filled the cafe. Lily ran up to Grace, hugging her legs as if she'd already made up her mind. "Daddy, can Miss Grace come to my school play?" she asked. Grace knelt and smiled. "Only if I get the front row seat." Months later, the once broken single dad stood beside the billionaire he once only saw in magazines, both laughing as they watched Lily twirl on stage in her little costume. They weren't pretending anymore. Life had taken two strangers, one running from her loneliness, the other from his pain, and somehow placed them right where they were meant to be. Because sometimes, the most beautiful stories aren't about riches or fame. They're about finding someone who sees the best in you when the world only sees the worst. If this story touched your heart, please take a moment to like, comment, share, and subscribe to Kindness Journal. Your support helps us bring more real, emotional stories to life. Special request before you go, comment below. Do you believe fate can bring two broken souls together at the perfect time? And remember, sometimes love doesn't begin with a promise. Sometimes it begins with pretending.